As you all know, Duraludon is finally back in competitive Pokemon, and because of its new evolution, Duraludon, is actually already available for usage in NU, which is of course going to shake up the tier quite a bit. This is a Pokemon with base 535 stats, so it clearly will have some sort of niche in the metagame. And it's got some buffs. We're going to talk about those buffs today. Of course, before we talk too much, I'm going to throw y'all that little reminder, do subscribe. We're getting pretty close to 6K subscribers. We got like 2 weeks before the end of the year, so if we could hit 6K, hey man, all I'm saying, that'd be pretty banging. So, I want to talk about every Duraludon set that I can think of first, but I do want to emphasize these first two, because what buffs did Duraludon get? Well, the biggest one that people are going to talk about is Eviolite. Eviolite Duraludon is very interesting. And although I'm not sure how commonplace it'll be as an item, because I do think there's a lot of incentive to these other two sets right here, I think it's worth talking about because it opens up quite a bit. This Pokemon already has really good bulk. And by really good, I mean, it's not great, but it's pretty good. Especially when you talk about a set like Iron Defense Body Press. It already amps up your bulk a lot. And an issue that Duraludon had last gen particularly was how bad this special defense stat is. So you'd often see a lot of those Iron Press sets have to EV into special defense. They'd run like substitute leftovers too. But you'd lose a lot of that oomph you could have with your boosted body press because you were having to do stuff like, okay, I need, I don't even remember the EVing, 200 some odd special defense just so a Vaporeon Scald wouldn't break your sub. And of course you're subbing so you don't get burned. It was really, really unfortunate. But with Eviolite, hey man, I'm getting a lot of that bulk back now, baby. And of course this meta doesn't have bulky waters anyway, so we don't even have to care about sub. So there's a lot of nice going on here. And of course just being able to patch up this weakness in tandem with Terra, being able to patch up any potential strong attacks that you might get thrown your way, like a Moonblast from, say, Sylveon. I think there's a lot to like about it in concept. So, this first set is just some generic offensive Stealth Rock set. We've seen Duraludon run this before, wink wink nudge nudge, but I'm kind of curious about the idea of it with Eviolite, because offense teams typically run something like Copper as a rocker, or Rhydon in certain old gens. You have Jargonium Z Druddigon back in Sun and Moon. You're going to have Piloswine on some more bulky offense builds. And I do think something like Eviolite Duraludon offers a bit in the same vein as Piloswine, where it's pretty bulky with that Eviolite boost, so you're getting quite a lot of defensive presence just naturally through having this on your team. Some pretty decent resistances too in flying and normal. Not that Asmon takes all of the flying attacks in you too well, but with an Eviolite you actually can take them okay-ishly, which I think is pretty decent. And then the coverage on this Mon, I will say, is kind of awkward to figure out. Mostly when it comes to this last slot, I do think you have to run Flash Cannon, because we've got Sylveon in the tier, we got Florges in the tier. I think there's even one other fairy type that I was considering when I threw Flash Cannon on here, right? Now we have one more. I guess Klefki is relevant enough. Screamtail, yeah, there you go. So, unfortunately, a move that's not maybe the greatest otherwise will find its way here. I think you could also go, like, last move the Body Press. You've got a lot of options in this last slot. I had Foul Play there as originally just some weird compromise target move that, like, hits Raja decently strong for decently good damage, hits Bronzong super effectively, and it could even hit, like, a default Decidueye. As I'm sure that Mom beats you 1v1 with enough luck. But maybe Body Press is just a little better. You've also got, I mean, if we want to talk about how we're invested in special attack anyway, this is probably the more practical of all the options. Dark Pulse also hits Delphox, which I think that's pretty relevant. But yeah, I think in this meta especially, I don't think Balance is a super great build. And that's mostly because it feels like Balance can't really get what it wants going defensively with the, typical 3 slots you see on a balance. As, the name of the archetype suggests, balanced teams have a balance of offensive Pokemon and defensive Pokemon, 3 and 3. It's the most elementary way you can look at it. And so, having to deviate to bulky offense is typically what teams are doing now, so you get a lot of that power still that you want if you're not going full stall, while still retaining a lot of defensive presence on your build and having the ability to switch into all of the threats that you has. I think Duraludon actually offers a lot for those teams, like we talked about. You got a lot of bulk, you got a lot of power, and like I said with Pylo, another thing that's pretty key is the speed. Bulky offense can run into some issues where you're a little slow if you're not careful, which is why something like Piloswine has been so common on those builds in the past, because Ice Shard, just having that priority is really, really nice. Something like even Dragonium Z Druddigon, you talk about how it has Glare. So people would run Glare, Stealth Rock, Z Outrage, Earthquake. You get a little bit of speed control there. Duraludon, meanwhile, offers just some natural speed, as you can see, hitting 295. It's not too bad. Also, we'll say, I think you could probably on this set, even really any set if you want, you could do this. I'm gonna still go max speed though on any generically offensive Duraludon, I believe, because speed ties could happen, speed ties with Toxicroak could happen. Definitely a lot to worry about, but I think something like this could work out. Terra Ghost I picked because fighting types are of course really good in this tier. I do think there's even incentive to something like Terra Dark. Amping up that Dark Pulse if you're trying to do some extra damage to, say, a Bronzong could be okay. Even if there was something that just came to mind that Dark Pulse would be really good for if it was powered up. I'm so sad that it left my mind as quickly as it entered. But just know, I am thinking quite a lot about the potential of what this move can do. It was for blocking the attack of something. Indeedee, yeah. Indeedee got... this is completely diverging from what we were talking about. Yeah, that's a thing again. So, being able to maybe block an expanding force from Indeedee sounds pretty decent. Maybe you run into some mono stored power mon from, like, maybe you run, like Articuno Galar. You could run into Agility, Calm Mind Roost. I think even that could be decent. And just the extra chip on Copper Bronzong, that's also pretty nice. Body Press retaining some use too. I would say Terra Ghost Body Press especially is pretty practical. Like, you can still Draco a Delphox, right? Body Press, I wouldn't even say you can still Body Press a Bronze. Like, you can still just Draco it. You'll do like 25-ish. You get your rocks up, you cancel the lefties. You could probably trade some Body Presses versus it too. But something like this for Chansey is pretty decent. Because, yeah, you wall it because it can't hit you once you Terra. And Body Press, I mean, you're not gonna beat it down super quickly, but you're gonna force it out. So I think that's pretty useful. And we can talk about Iron Press now. I think Iron Press Duraludon with Eviolite's very, very interesting. Again, I want to mention how, because there is no bulky water types in Inu, at least for the moment. Bulky water types to the traditional Scald spamming sense. Let's throw that clarity there. You don't have to worry about getting burned nearly as much, at least by a bulky water. And those were commonly some of the mons that would pivot into Dura, mostly expecting offensive sets. So you're on the Iron Press with sub, and you just beat them 1v1. It was very just disgusting, very egregious, very X-rated. But we get a little bit of extra leeway now. Eviolite as well, making the bulk just naturally better. You can afford to drop sub entirely. You don't need that safety net. I'm sure sub is still going to be okay. I'm unconvinced about sub with Eviolite. I don't know how much I love that idea. Something like Nidoking could get away with sub 3 attacks, even though it ran Life Orb. Because with Nidoking, yeah, you were subbing because you were a demon wall breaker that was going to start punching holes. So that sub was really good for limiting offensive counterplay to you, which was a very effective manner of dealing with a mon like Nidoking, which doesn't really have a lot of defensive answers. Duraludon, different mon. He actually answered defensively. So, I don't love it here with Eviolite, but maybe try it with lefties. And Terra still sounds like a pretty big buff there, too. All of that to say, Eviolite will give you a lot of advantage now in some matchups, especially when we talk about Terra Poisoning. That's still going to give you that fight resist. And I mean, we can also look at a lot of fighting types in the tier. Hisui and Decidueye, that mon ain't beating you down once you Terra. Once you get that Iron Defense up. Flamigo? Flamigo who? Flamigo who? You don't CC you. Look how much, you're at 272 without a defense boost. And then a Violet takes you up another 136. That's up to 408. Like, Flamigo's not beating you down, at least not comfortably. It is not a very good matchup for Flamigo. Gallade? The only thing I'd worry about is Gallade going for SD and critting you before you can break through it. Because admittedly, Gallade has good special bulk. Not quad, but it does resist body press. I don't think it takes it very well, but maybe there's still some cheese thing it does with Terra ghosting on you, you know? And where's some other fighting types? Tauros Aqua Paldea or Tauros Blaze Paldea? Yeah, neither of those are really matching up too well. I'll say this one could be a little more annoying, because Will-O-Wisp is real. However, I don't think we're really going to see too much of this mon anymore with Aqua Breed in the tiers, so do with that what you will. And then Croak's kind of the same deal. A lot of these others, it just can't hit you. Like, you Terra, and then what does it do? It can knock your Eviolite. That's really all. And then we talk about Terra Poisoning too. That Fairy matchup is very, very useful to have go in your favor. That way, something like a Sylveon can't switch into you, anticipate the boost, and then just try and Hyper Voice you for 5 million. And, you know, it could look for that Terra Water if it needed to. Maybe it starts trying to 1v1 you with Calm Mind stuff. And yeah, I'm here to tell you right now, especially even if it like Terra's on you, it's not going to start beating you. That's probably the biggest issue for Sylveon. It goes for Terra Water, and it just can't beat you anymore. It'd have to probably stay in its fairy form. And Flash Cannon, although you're uninvested, it's still going to do a pretty decent amount. So it's not so simple for Sylveon. But I think this set will be really good. Maybe if Altaria ticks up in usage again, it could run into some issues. Or even just defensive Arcanine. Because these are two mons that could match up pretty okay versus it. I don't think Arcanine takes your boosted body press particularly well, but it's not the worst. And of course Altaria is just a mon that it could look for a Terra, like a timely Terra Poison on you, and that could be tough, because it's just going to Willow you, and then you're really not doing anything. And we get to the next set, and I'm going to talk about some stuff that's not necessarily a Eviolite Duraludon now, but still Terra coming into play. I think Specs Duraludon's a quite interesting idea. The biggest reason for it is the coverage. Although it's not one of these mons like Terapagos, where it just has every move in the game. Like, again, you can look at Terapagos real quick. Like, they literally gave it coverage of every type. Leave me alone. Leave me alone, Demon Turtle. Leave me alone. Look at all these colors. But, although it's not a mon like that, the coverage it does get is really, really complimentary of what Duraludon wants to hit. And Terra only makes that more pronounced, because this mon previously hasn't had coverage for steel types, outside of the random fighting moves it learns, like Body Press and Brick Break. Unironically, you could run last gen Body Press on a Spec set, and it wasn't even necessarily bad. Like, it technically was passable, but now you've got Terra. You could do something like Terra Blast Fire, or even Ground, either works. Ground might even have some like extra application in this meta, because we've seen a lot more heat proof on Bronzong. But you go Terra Blast Ground, you gotta move for those variants of Bronzong. You even get something for like Colossal, which some people may try to pivot into you, so I think it's fair game. You gotta move for that Copperajah, get a super effective move for Delphox if you're looking to just pop it like a balloon immediately as it comes in. You beat up on Klefki. Look at all these mons that just don't really do anything versus you now. I think even being a Volt blocker is kind of useful in that regard, because you could see some people try and reposition around Duraludon, I could imagine. Like maybe they switch in expecting I don't know, different move. Like, a Jolteon could come in, expect a T-Bolt. You Flash Cannon instead, and then they stay in to Volt Switch out for the chip. And you just Terra Ground and Flash Cannon them again. I do think there's some use to that as a sequence. And of course, other options too. I probably would... I don't even want to say I'd keep Terra Blast, because I think there's going to be some times where you drop it. But what if we did something like this even, right? We talked about not Terra Blast, we talked about Terra Dark earlier. Maybe you could do Terra Dark Dark Pulse on a spec set. Same type of idea as earlier, where it just gives you a little bit more damage output versus something like a Copper. Lets you block any expanding force shenanigans from Indeedee, which, yeah, that mon is real and scary. Gives you a very good move also versus Bronzong. Probably just lets you obliterate that mon, frankly. I don't even want to downplay the ability to flinch stuff. Like, I actually think it could be kind of decent. Even being a Ghost Resist could come in. Because maybe something like Hoopa trying to pivot into you. And you just Terra Dark. Like, you get like the 1v1 versus Hoopa and you just Terra Dark and their Scarf thinking they can revenge kill you with Shadow Ball. And then it just becomes a completely favorable matchup for you instead. I do think that could happen. I think there's going to be a lot of messing around with Terra types. Because you don't even have to necessarily go Terra Darker. You could just do like we did on one of these other sets where you're like Ghost. Or you're Poison. Or maybe even just go Terra Dragon and you just try to make your Draco Meteor do 500 bajillion damage. I think there's a lot of good options. And then last set, just pay it a little homage. We saw this concept on Duraludon quite a lot in Gen 8. Eject Pack lead Dura for HO teams. Stealth Rock 3 attacks. Draco was a great pivoting move. We've seen Goodra as well run a lot of Draco Meteor Eject Pack this gen on offensive teams to give them some type of extra pivot support. And I think it's worked out pretty well for those builds. So I mean, what's really stopping Dura from doing the same? Also, I'll even mention for this set, you could definitely do like Scarf as well. But Specs is just far more fun, you know? Like, I'm trying to hit stuff hard. I'm not trying to do no stupid Scarf stuff. Chansey is kind of an inevitable matchup, so I do think this set could struggle a lot more this gen than it has in Gen 8. But hey, we got this homie over here to fix that up. I know we just started talking about this. I even think, though, you could do Terra Ghost on this set specifically if you were trying to just stunt on Chansey. Because Chansey can always Terra Fairy on you. Do keep that in mind. Chansey can go for its Terra Fairy or Poison, I guess. And it can look for that perfectly advantageous matchup. Because Flash Cannon won't do enough to Chansey. It's going to like T-Wave you and then it's going to just probably stall you out. I don't know if it actually can, but I'm sure Chansey can find a way. Especially if it's like Calm Mind Shadow Ball. So, I guess Terra Ghost wouldn't help versus that. But look, if you can force Chansey to do all of that to beat you, I think there's something to be said positive about that. Anyhow, this set should also be pretty decent on HO this gen. Especially since a lot of people's responses to Hyper Offense has revolved around leading a Fastball and pivoting. Duraludon actually is kind of hard to do that versus, because if you look at a lot of the common Fastballs people have done that with, it's been like Jolteon, H-Trode, and I guess now Flamigo. We've seen Quillfish do it too. But outside of Flamigo, none of these really have that great of a Duraludon matchup. Like, what are they doing really to you? Jolteon's Volt Switch will not do enough. And I think even, we could talk about, this kind of goes more into the first set, I will admit. But I want to talk about this from the perspective of HO, so I'm going to keep it on the Eject Pack set. I think if you wanted, you could still run Eviolite or Focus Sash here. Either of these ideas works. Focus Sash could be the most useful. And then go back to the Steel Beam stuff. As Steel Beam works as a pseudo-pivot of sorts. And especially into a mon like Flamigo, where we did mention it's probably one of the few Scarf pivots that can actually give a little bit of issue, just because you have to respect CC and you can't Terra versus it. I almost feel like, by the way, guys, I don't remember if I did. I feel like I said you just Terraghost and Flamigo. Yeah, if I said that, I was lying. You don't. But let's talk about it through this perspective. If you worried about the Flamigo stuff, I think something like Steel Beam Sash is viable. One, you tank the CC and you just T-Bolt Flamigo and it's dead. But after that, if your opponent doesn't have a great mon to go into, maybe their team's just a little too slow, you could then Steel Beam the next turn for momentum. Or you could still look for your rocks. This kind of idea still works really well, but going Eject Pack Draco or like Sash Steel Beam, even Eviolite Steel Beam like we said, I think both of those are pretty decent options as well that could get some exploration. And Terra, I don't know about how useful Terra is on this lead set, as like Terra Ghosting, I mean, there's not really a ton that's giving me positive matchups versus. But I mean, maybe some other mon with CC, right? I think even going for like Terra Dark on this kind of set could be useful to block Grafii stuff or Tornadus stuff. Like, if I don't want to get Prankster taunted by a Tornadus or Grafii, maybe I'd Terra Dark just to say I'm getting my rocks and you'll like it. And yeah, I hope y'all enjoyed. I think Duraludon's definitely going to be one of the better mons in the tier. Not something like A+ rank threat type, but I do think that it adds a very, very valid threat level to the tier. I will do videos probably talking about Rhydon and Porygon 2 as well, the only other relevant NFEs. If I looked at the list earlier, and in terms of new ones, I think Combuskin could be half relevant, but we're talking about a mon that's going to be just something people use for fun more than anything. Oh, Reuniclus is back? Oh my god, I forgot. I completely forgot Reuniclus came back. Let's go. But yeah, I will probably do a video talk about Rhydon and P2 as well, because those two should be relevant. They should be viable to some degree. Hope you had a great video. God, I can't speak. I'm tired. Leave me alone. Hope you had a great time watching this video. I'm gonna go try and wake up more. I'll catch you next time. Peace.